Hi, Grace. It's so nice to have you here today. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great, thank you, and I'm really glad to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yes. So for anyone who hasn't listened to the episode yet, Grace wrote a beautiful essay about an experience that she had with dating and finding the beauty and the other loves that she has in her life. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But before we get into your essay, I'd love to know a little bit more about who you are and how you got started with writing, whether it was when you were young, as a child, just journaling, or maybe later on you picked up a tablet or a laptop and just started putting like scattered thoughts to words. I'm just kind of curious how you became a writer.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So to first just give a little bit about me generally, and then me as a writer. My name is Grace. I'm 26 years old, and I'm from Boston originally, grown up in Jamaica Plain. And how I came to writing, I think it's been somewhat of a lifelong thing for me. I'm sure, I could dig up some old embarrassing writing projects from like elementary school or from way back when, but all through for as long as I can remember, I always loved classes that were very writing heavy. So, English or history. And I've always really enjoyed writing as a craft. And I've always sought out those opportunities where I can, but I think my most prolific writing is certainly my journaling. That's a very heavily utilized outlet of mine. I think also is probably why I'm most drawn to personal writing, such as this essay. While I think I've been doing a lot of writing kind of on my own, this is the first personal
Mm,
essay that I've ever shared.
that's awesome. And so happy that you're sharing it here. We're so excited.
Me too.
Um, that's great. I also have like journaled throughout my life. For me, it's like such a cathartic thing, and I definitely encourage people. Sometimes it's helpful to just process your emotions out loud. I mean, we process things differently, but I have found that a lot of us, like writers, tend to put our emotions and thoughts to papers, different experiences. And then to have that work in your journal now culminate in this very articulate piece. It seems like you've really come a long way with your writing, and like so exciting that you're still continuing to hone that craft. I love personal essays, and that's why I've started this podcast. So that's amazing. What can you tell me a little bit more about this story? Like why you felt like it was important for people to hear it? Was it just something that you kind of wrote and then you decided that, it was important to do it? And also the way that you wrote it in such a like raw and honest way. I mean, you're really like putting us in the moment with you, like going through this experience. Um, so if you could tell me just a little bit more about kind of like what led to put this specific experience onto paper.
Yeah. So I saw the call for submissions that you posted in a coffee shop that I frequent, and I knew I wanted to write about friendship. That was, the thing that was most pressing to me and that is most beautiful to me. And so I knew that I wanted my piece to kind of center around that. But it took me a bit to figure out how or, what the narrative would be, what the story would be. And then this is sort of silly, but it's what actually inspired me to write this piece is a series that I saw on TikTok called Who the Fuck Did I Marry? I'm not sure if you've heard of it or if you're
Yeah,
familiar.
that sounds amazing and
It's
awful at the same
really,
time.
I recommend it. It went viral. It was a woman named Risa Tisa, and she told a 50-part story. I think it was collectively like over 8 hours of storytelling that she broke up and organized very well and told in a very compelling way. And it really took off. I think it was, many things go viral, but to have something of that length and of that time commitment
Yeah.
really, grasped so many people. I I just thought that was very impressive. And sorry if I should give extra context. The story is a woman telling her experience meeting, dating, falling in love with, marrying, and then divorcing a pathological liar. All of the trials and tribulations that comes along with that. And I joke to my friends, like story kind of like that. Like I could
Yeah.
tell a similar one. And I meant that jokingly, but I also felt like I could see over the course of the videos and her storytelling that this seemed to be a really cathartic experience for her, and lots of people found it powerful to hear and listen to, even though, lots of it, parts of it were so outlandish, you have to hope it's not relatable to people per se. But I think that even when the actual details are not something you've experienced in your own life, there's the power in watching a person tell a story that's very vulnerable and personal. Although that is a somewhat joking source of inspiration, I also do mean that seriously, because after
Yeah.
I gave some thought to that, I was like, well, it's a story I have to tell, and it is one that culminates in friendship for me. And so I kind of felt like I was able to marry the two and tell a story about the people that I love and the community that I love that uplifted me through a really negative experience, and also just share that experience because it's mine to tell.
That's amazing. And that's, I feel like that really speaks my reasons for starting the show as well. I have seen myself reflected in other people's stories. Even if it wasn't the exact situation, like I've derived so much inspiration from like other people's lived experiences. It's TikTok, but it is still storytelling. I feel like we undervalue, but there is so much that can come from like people being vulnerable and sharing. And it can make us brave enough to like share our own truths, and even if you can't connect to every detail of someone else's life, there might be little bits in there where you do see yourself reflected. So I have to find this TikTok story
I
and like
recommend it.
hear
It's
it. Yeah.
it's quite good storytelling, and you can listen to it like a kind of a audiobook and just kind of let it run.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
And I can also see like, potentially like someone who is in that kind of relationship seeing that or hearing, and being able to identify those things maybe earlier on, like maybe she spares someone else from an entire marriage. So I always feel there is so much beauty and so much that can come from sharing your story, and you can help people without even knowing it. So that's so great. And then inspired you to write this essay. So I was just curious, like, you put us in the scene where you've discovered that this person might be a deceitful person. But you're about to have breakfast and you're going to confront him. And, I think you did a really good job in your essay of like putting us in that moment with you. But I'm curious internally, what were your emotions? What were you thinking? Because you seem very calm and collected in your essay. But I'm curious, like, what else was going on for you?
Yeah, thinking back on that, I just remember it being such a normal and nice morning, and then receiving that text from a friend, or a screenshot of my boyfriend at the time's Bumble profile. The kind of sticking feeling in that moment, or what endures most for me, is the initial lack of panic. Because I truly felt so secure, so in love in this relationship, that I really felt like there must be an explanation for this. I recognize that this is like certainly questionable information that I'm getting here, and this is definitely something I'm going to ask about. But I really feel like there must be an explanation. And I just remember so vividly that being my gut reaction, because as I said in the essay, it was just very far outside of my realm of reality. And then once I, rounded the corner into my kitchen and began asking about this text that I'd received, the screenshot, the Bumble profile, um, and watching, my boyfriend at the time kind of get flustered or start to squirm a bit, and become very visibly uncomfortable with this conversation and my asking this question, that made me kind of click in and realize, actually, I think there might be something very nefarious going on here. So let me just, like spin around in a circle and rejoin this conversation with an entirely different tone. Because now I recognize that, in fact, I might be stepping outside of the reality in which, things were all good and happy and fine. And so then comes, adrenaline and anger and all the things that happen when you are like confronting someone about
Right.
something so painful.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I would have like lost my mind. Later on, you talk about realizing this person you thought was that person wasn't. But in the moment initially, you're like, no, I have this idea of who you are. There's no way that there's another reality. So I can see you going into it like, oh no, like there's an explanation. I feel like all of those feelings are super valid. And, you kind of move into deciding to have separate Christmases and like just like kind of reconvening later. But then you speak about something that I connected to was you tell your mom and you're like, okay, now like there's no point of return here. And I remember having something similar. It was like so many people at this point know how crappy you are of a person that there's like no way that I can go back. But you chose to tell your mom. And do you feel like that was an unconscious thing where it's like you told your mom and then you were like, oops, now I told my mom, there's no way that I can forgive this person? Or do you feel like you told your mom and some part of you was like, okay, once I make this step, I know that I deserve better here, and telling her is almost like my way of like protesting, even though you still were holding out hope to have these different conversations. I don't know if you've thought about that at all.
I think, everyone knows that once you tell your mom, there is no going back. So once you tell your mom how someone wronged you, that's it. That's it for them. I like that question because it definitely wasn't a oops, we're kind of locked into this outcome now. It was more to me, it was more demonstrative to me that from that initial conversation, I knew, even though it was layered under such, pain and confusion, and there was still so much that I hadn't yet learned. From that initial Bumble conversation, I think I knew there was no coming back from this. There was no going back. It kind of immediately popped my bubble, which was, what we were just talking about, like the forcefulness that was required to kind of pop that bubble. Was more of the kind of decisive moment. But once my illusion was kind of shattered of this person, I think it was going to be over even before I learned about the rest of it. And I think that telling my mom was just a subconscious confirmation that I
Mm-hmm.
was always going to arrive at that outcome. It took
Yeah.
it took a turn because things
Yeah.
took a turn, and I learned other information. And I think that experience indicates to me that, like, had I never learned anything beyond that, that still would have been the end.
Yeah. Yeah. The trust was broken at that point. Yeah. That reminds me, there's another part in your essay where your friends are sort of doing the investigative work for you and then told you more. And I always joke about, with my friends, I'm like, I feel like the CIA just needs to recruit a bunch of women because I have literally had friends. I don't know how, like the female friends in my life, they just find all of this information within seconds. And I'm like, how? But how great to have these kinds of friends in your life because it seems it kind of saved you a little bit of trauma in that sense of like having to put yourself through, like, I'm going to do all this digging. You say that like your friend shared this with you, but like, was it just like that one revelation, multiple friends? And did they also just find out in that moment, or had they had kind of like concerns about this person's true character?
I think it was primarily that one revelation or that one conversation that kind of, opened it all up to us all realizing that there was a lot more to this than just, what we initially knew. And I don't know if this is lucky or unlucky, but that was new information to all of us at that time. I feel very grateful that amidst what felt like, a kind of central pillar of my life coming crashing down or crumbling down, I really wasn't in a position or just didn't have the motivation or the drive to conduct
Mm.
an investigation and do all this other stuff to figure out what else was this person lying to me about. But that was a piece that my friends were able to take on for me, and I really, really appreciate that. And I like this mental image of them, being little detectives and doing whatever
Yeah.
they were doing, like, off to the side while I was going through this personal crisis, and them being able to support me in that way. But I
Yeah.
think any time a relationship dissolves or implodes or, whatever ends in any way, I think there are always revelations that are shared that weren't shared during the relationship. But
Right.
not so much about the cheating, because I think that was kind of, you know uh, eye opening to all of us at the same time.
Yeah.
But just, people's honest thoughts, or, you know all the little things that aren't really shared with you when it just looks like you're happy and this person is making you happy. So, but the actual, meat of it or the real damning behavior was definitely a kind of new revelation that came right at that
Mm, yeah. Yeah. And I think that says a lot about your friends too, because sometimes we do it, like meeting people where they are is very important. And like sometimes we have the concerns, but we're like, okay, this person is happy. And unless there's a cause for alarm, really, like this person shares, I'm just going to support them. And sometimes that's the best we can do because unfortunately, I feel like you have to go through it. Like you have to go through the revelation and the like deciding like I'm going to move forward. Really nobody else can do that for you. So to have friends that just support you and are like we're going to support you either way. Even if we have these concerns, we're just going to like keep it to ourselves because we see you happy, but okay, now you're not happy, so we're going to tell you like we had these concerns. And I think that's just like being a really great friend. It's like, just kind of being there for someone and riding through the wave. And you say that you have a lot of gratitude for your friends. Do you I think it seems like at this moment you're realizing that having a partner is just like an addition, right? I've said this in other episodes, but I always say I'm biased. I felt the pressure, but I feel like there is just so much pressure to like, find the one and like have a partner, and I feel like that can cause us and other people to really miss the value of the other beautiful relationships in our lives and the other beautiful things that we're accomplishing. And so I'm curious if you always had an equal balance of like understanding, oh, it's a relationship, but my friends are still, um, or if, this breakup really made you see like, oh, actually, like it is the cherry on top. It isn't actually everything as like we're pushed to feel like it is everything, the be it end all kind of love. And it's not, I mean, I don't think it is.
time. I don't either, as it turns out. But
Yeah.
I like to think my friends have always been a core part of my life. And so for me it wasn't so much of an either or, just that, romantic relationships can be very all consuming. A lot of the times you can be really wrong about a person, or maybe devote too much of yourself into a relationship. I think I had kind of a unique experience coming out of this because I've been, I joke, I've been a serial monogamist like since I was about 16 years old. So
Mm.
once this all happened and I found myself single, I actually was really excited about that, because it was an experience I felt like I had been missing out on for,
Mm.
a portion of my growing up period. And my friends have always been the main piece of my life, but I think that this experience was one where I really needed them. They really delivered. They were really there for me, and got me through it. And as I mentioned in the piece, while also dealing with a lot of their own struggles, the early 20s are just kind of the trenches for most people. So we're all kind of lost and figuring our stuff out, and it kind of feels like we're like playing hot potato with like who
Yeah.
needs the most help, or like what we can do for each other at that time. And so I think that was just such a profound and beautiful thing to witness. For me it's not an either or of like friendship, or like valuing friendship or valuing romantic relationships, but rather, when things go up in flames and then when the dust settles, the people who are there throughout all of it are my friends, and I'm endlessly grateful to them for that, and just very happy that I have people like that in my life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think it's becoming easier to talk about the reality of social isolation and loneliness. And um, I think it's something that's been ignored, but is like a big thing. There's a lot of people who are like, okay, how do I find these people in my life and build community? And so I'm curious about like, are these friends from childhood? How did you meet them? Are you still connected to all the people that you spoke about in your essay? How have these friendships come to be for you?
A lot of the friendships that I'm referencing in this piece specifically are ones that date back to my childhood. And I think I have to say, whenever we're talking about community and friendships and building community, I had a 26-year head start because I live in my hometown, and I live nearby my family. I live nearby friends who also grew up around here. And I think that's for better or for worse, an aspect of Boston is that a lot of people tend to stay in it. And I think that it's always a double-edged sword, because you could run into anyone from high school or elementary school at a grocery store. But the beauty of it is that, there are so many people who have watched me grow up and who have loved me through so many different versions of myself, who also have kind of made me who I am and who have grown with and around. So that to me it feels a lot of my friendships feel more like family in that way. Um, and then, I also reference some of my long distance friends because while folks I grew up with who are still here, obviously we get the pleasure of proximity, but not everyone is. And, some
Right.
people have left, some people live on the other side of the country. So I also like to say that at any given moment, I'm in numerous parasocial friendships with
Mhm.
people who I FaceTime every day, friends from college or from summer camp I attended growing up. And I think that just having the presence of those people in my life be such a priority, and my favorite thing and my favorite part of my day, it helps really build strong and long lasting friendships because we just spend so much time either with each other physically or on FaceTime. And I think all that time invested in one another and just, being on the phone while we grocery shop or while I drive to my destination is really what colors my life and what makes it
Mhm.
feel so full.
It's actually really good for your health, and like longevity to have these like strong ties. Not only is it like actually helping your day to day, but you're actually helping your lifespan. So it's so beautiful that you have connections here and then across the country. Um, and I know not everybody gets to have a 26-year head start, but I think being able to like highlight the value of like having a community and how it can really make a difference in difficult times is important here. I think your essay is like very inspiring and I think will help a lot of people, especially if you're in the trenches of maybe going through something similar, but then you go back out on the dating scene. It seems like it was kind of fun for you at first because you had been in these long relationships. And you speak about coming to terms with your bisexuality when you were in this relationship, but you were obviously in love with this person. And I'm curious how that impacted you or how you approached dating, after the breakup. Was there a new found sense of freedom? Like, now you're single, but you can also embrace your full identity and explore this other side of yourself as well from this breakup.
I think there were a lot of gifts in this relationship ending and my being able to continue, into my 20s not being in a relationship. And one of, if not the biggest gift of all out of all of that is being able to explore my sexuality and really kind of learn and step into that aspect of myself that, I kind of knew was there. Um, was just in this, long term, at least committed on one side relationship.
Hmm.
And so exiting that, I was actually really, obviously, I experienced all the feelings of heartbreak that one does, but I
Right.
was quite excited to date and to
Hmm.
date people besides men, and really just explore that part of myself and also, consider how I wanted to present myself. I think it comes into a lot of different parts of my growing up, and just my kind of coming to feel comfortable with my identity, not just sexuality wise, although that was certainly a big piece of it, but also just kind of figuring out who I was and who I wanted to be and which parts of myself I liked most. And I felt like having nothing but, space and time and freedom to explore those things was such a gift, especially when I had pictured, myself being in this relationship for a long time, getting to instead spend a portion of my life just truly being single and focusing on myself and, dating and having new
Hmm.
experiences and having, the ability to just have fun was really a gift to me, and I'm very very grateful that I took that time to myself and didn't
Yeah.
rush into anything, but really spent it figuring out, the parts of myself that I like most and want to
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, definitely. I think it can be challenging sometimes to be single, especially if you hit a point where everyone else is sort of partnered up, but there is like so much learning that can happen. And I think it's really great that you were able to honor all of who you were, and are. There's I think being able to be fully free and think about like hobbies that you like or other activities or like who you want to go on a date with, and even deciding like what your new type is or like what doesn't work for you. Sometimes you really do need to be like alone and do a lot of like experimentation. I think there's so much learning that can happen when you're kind of forced to be alone and you have to just find your happiness. So that's awesome. I'm actually curious if there were things besides dating that like this time off allowed you to explore, like hobbies or places you wanted to go see, or just like something memorable that you felt like has come in the last three years since this initial incident happened.
Thinking on these 3 years, I think this was also a time that I was really exploring, career wise, job wise, what do I want? Where am I going? And, should I take this job or should I go to grad school or should I do XYZ? And in that, there were several other times that I kind of stumbled and really was unsure. And, a way that I had described it at one point was I felt like I had dropped all of the like adulting infinity stones, like the job or the relationship or, just trying to figure out how at what point am I going to feel like settled or sure, and I
Mm,
think that amidst some of those more chaotic periods or more unsure periods where I wasn't necessarily holding all the adulting infinity stones, I was able to take some opportunities that I otherwise would never have. For instance, I was able to spend a summer being an au pair in Mallorca in Spain,
that's
nearby a friend of
awesome.
mine who was also working there as an au pair. And that was possible because, I was kind of in between two jobs and wasn't sure, if I was going to move into this apartment or that apartment. And I just took a second and was like, you know what? I don't have a lot tethering me right now in this
Mm,
moment to being in one place or doing one thing. And I know that there are, for the majority of the rest of the time, you are kind of tied by one thing or another. So despite my, struggles with trying to figure out and pick up all those adulting infinity stones, I was able to take a beat and just say, you know what, this is
mhm.
one moment where I can do this like potentially, kind of irresponsible thing or just fun
Yeah.
thing. And that was really beautiful. And I recognized that I was only able to do it because of, some of the other areas in my life where I wasn't so sure, wasn't so settled. While experiencing that uncertainty, and I was like, well, another
Yeah.
fun thing I can do is,
Yeah.
this random opportunity that just kind of plopped into my lap. So that's a bit of an extreme example because, I recognize that most people aren't just able to up and,
Yeah.
be an au pair in Spain for a summer, but just to kind of a representative of when things aren't going exactly the way you're hoping that or you wanted them to or you want them to,
Mhm.
there's also a benefit in just taking a little bit of that time and doing a thing that you otherwise never would be able to. So that certainly jumps out as me as to me as one of my favorite experiences from the past 3 years.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. But Spain is on my bucket list, so that sounds so cool. And I feel like there's moments where I'm like, oh, I really wish I had been a little bit more irresponsible. I feel like if you want to go do that in your 40s, you should. But I think if there is an opportunity in your life where you can be irresponsible or just try something totally different, you should do it. And if it's in your 20s, that's amazing because, the time is not always there. Sometimes you say in the future I'll do it, but maybe you stick to a job, you stick to a place. So how cool that you experimented that and that your friend was also nearby, so there was a little bit of support still going somewhere abroad where maybe you didn't know anyone else.
Didn't have to be as scared. But
Yeah. Yeah,
it was lots of fun, and I recommend Spain and Mallorca specifically going on a bucket list.
that's awesome. It will be going on the list today. I think there's so much bravery that is required to even date and be vulnerable and put yourself out there again. Reflecting back on your experience, is there any advice that you would give to somebody who's maybe going through it, a situation, or struggling with trusting again? Because it sounds like you did eventually get to a place where you were able to trust again. And you mentioned somebody in your essay. I don't know if there's someone you're still dating, but you did open up your heart again. And I'm just kind of curious about how you got there, and if there's any advice that you give to other people who might be struggling with getting to that point.
I really appreciate this question because this is definitely something I wanted to touch on, which is that, when this all happened, I had this fear that it would change the way that I trust or the way that I love, because if it's not obvious, I'm a very trusting person, and obviously that has also, put me into some less than ideal situation. But I felt uncomfortable with the idea that, this thing that this other person chose to do could kind of fundamentally change this aspect of me, which, I don't think is a bad thing. I recognize that it can clearly put me into some bad situations. Um, but I didn't want to give it power to change that about me or change anything about me. And for a while, I was dating for fun and having these experiences during the past 3 years. But for most of that, I really didn't feel like I was ready to kind of be emotionally vulnerable with someone or to actually fall in love again. Sometimes I wondered, even though I wasn't wanting another relationship per se at that time, I would just wonder, when I eventually do, like, am I going to be able to trust someone
Mhm.
in the same way? Am I going to be able to fall in love in ways that still feel true to me? I didn't know, I wasn't sure because I just hadn't, had that experience yet. And when I did most recently, find the person that I am now currently dating, and when I'm in the early stages of getting to know them and falling for them, it was such a relief to still feel like myself in the experience of falling in love. And that brought me such peace because it showed me that, it didn't fundamentally change me. I just needed some time. I just needed to take some time to myself and to do all these things that we're talking about. So I guess what I would say from that is that other people's choices and actions are their own. It's what the person that I was dating, or from this essay, what he chose to do and the ways that he chose to act were entirely his choice and entirely his doing. That's not for me to take on as anything that I did wrong or incorrectly that caused this to happen.
Mm.
But really just that people are going to act the way that they want to act, and so I just felt like I needed to keep centered in the fact that, like, who I am fundamentally was not changed by this experience. Certain aspects of the ways that I might approach a relationship, or the things that I will or won't accept from a person in a relationship, those things can change, but that's also a function of growing up. I
Yeah.
don't attribute every difference between how I fell in love this time and how I fell in love that time to this, singular negative experience, for how that relationship ended. I also attribute it to the fact that I'm 26 years old now, and I was 18 when I met, this person. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of it is also, it's just the accumulation of experiences, good and bad, that kind of that's just a part of growing up, and that's a part of navigating things better, such that you find someone
Mhm.
who's even better for you than the last experience that you had, and you are better for them because you know so much more about yourself. You know the kind of relationship that you want to have and what you want that to look like. And so I think, good and bad experiences are all just navigating us towards whatever's better for us, and whatever's
Mhm.
more meant for us. And so, it's not that I'm glad that I had this one particular experience that I wrote this essay about. All the experiences, good and bad, that I've had thus far throughout my 20s have helped me figure out, what's important to me, what matters to me, what I want in friendships, what I want in relationships. And it's just helped me know myself more. And so I think, you only person who you are definitely going to stick with throughout your life is yourself, and
Yes.
knowing yourself as best as you can helps you find the people who should travel with you and who you want to keep close to you in your life. And so I think that out of this negative experience, I only deepened my friendships, deepened my relationship with myself, and now found a new romantic relationship that really brings me a lot of joy and feels very good.
Awesome. First of all, I just want to say I think you're such a mature. Sometimes I think back and I'm like the amount of time that I allowed like crappy men or friends or whatever like live, rent free in my mind. I'm like I wish I could just take that time back. So I'm like so happy for you that you have like come to all these realizations at 26. I wish I had done that at 26. So kudos to you for taking this painful experience and turning it into something beautiful for yourself. And when you said that the longest relationship, the one that is really true, is to ourselves. I mean, I think that's something that we forget, and you really do need to nurture yourself and like know who you are. And so that's so important. I'm like, if you have any time to like really, even if you're with somebody, to really learn who you are and what makes you happy, I think your life is just going to be so much more richer for it. Because at the end of the day, you are your biggest cheerleader. You're the one that's going to be there through the interviews, through the travels, through the experimenting. Like you're the one that's going to pick yourself up. I mean, even if you do have your friends, at the end of the day, you have to love who you are. I think so often when something doesn't work out or someone betrays us or does something, it can be so easy to take that blame as like something that, or like that situation, and just blame yourself of like and say like I'm the one that's not worthy or not enough. If I had been better, to just like kind of take that other person's behavior and see it as somehow you lacking in, but it really is the other person's poor decisions and other things that they need to work through. um and it's just a sign of incompatibility, not necessarily your worthiness to be loved or your greatness or your beauty. But I do think that there's something about the way that we speak to women or kind of encourage women to like be in these relationships that I think contributes to that, of like us feeling like we always have to impress. But to go back to like what you were saying about like how you feel about yourself now in this relationship, it really is just about like, can you be your full self? Like, are you happy with the person that's showing up on these dates in this relationship? And is that person loving you for that? Not necessarily like, let me do these things to impress this person. And I think that the way to get to that is to be able to take the time to like know who you are, but also to remember that incompatibility is not a reflection of your worth in a partnership. And it really can be just so easy to forget that. So I just wanted to like talk about that because I've forgotten it in the past, and so I'm like, but I think it's amazing that you have all these realizations and this maturity at 26. So I think you should be really proud of yourself for that.
Thank you. It was, I mean, I have a lot of more growing up to do throughout the rest of my life, but it was, I think it's really easy to tie a nice bow on things when
Mm,
I do feel like I've had all this opportunity to heal and to find love again. That feels really good to me. But obviously, just to state for the record, it was really not clear or fun or just the experience of getting there was the chaos, and that was like
mhm.
the tumultuousness and all of the like self-doubt and the things that I mentioned reading back in my old journals. And so I think it's easy to put a bow on things when you do have this much distance.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't thinking about it this way at many points prior to now.
Yeah.
Time also just helps.
Yeah, definitely. And going through it, it's like you kind of have to go through it to grow from it. Awesome. Well, I have a few more questions. You know, you've you mentioned like therapy and identify things that you still want to prioritize in your life. So, how are you prioritizing self-care and healing now? Or, are there things that you've established as rituals that you're like, even if I am in a loving relationship, these are things that I want to continue to honor and do for me going forward?
I think that journaling is like my main practice for just processing emotions, you mentioned at the very beginning, writing as a form of processing, and I certainly identify as an external processor, whether that's talking with friends or writing in my journal. And so I think recognizing that those are two really important avenues for me to just feel like I'm kind of like chewing on my emotions, and then kind of feels like I get them outside of me and can see them and can kind of really get a handle on them, and then make decisions from there and move on from there. So I think that those two things, both just relying on my friends and journaling, and also talking in therapy, and just leaning into the ways that I know I tend to process, and the ways that come naturally to me, and really using those as outlets. And then also, I think a part of the beauty of, spending some time in your 20s or whenever in your life, as you said, just getting to know yourself, is I've also just discovered new hobbies and new things that I'm wanting to involve in my life. And I'm always finding new ones. I'm always wanting to, start new activities or new creative
Mhm.
endeavors. And recognizing that is really the spice of life, just kind of filling your days with little silly things that make you happy, and with people that make you happy. So in my current relationship, I'm making a very conscious effort to keep all of those things as central as they were to me before, because they're what make me feel full, and keep me grounded and make me happy. And so I think still not just kind of flipping a switch and like getting into a relationship and leaving all those things at the door, but
Right.
recognizing that these are the things that um, kind of made me as comfortable and confident and ready to be vulnerable again and open up to someone again. And so they're not to be left at the door, but it's just, I'm adding another thing into the rotation of my life, and the things and people that make me happy, but more additive and not instead of.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, good for you for like continuing to like keep your rituals and for being clear on like, okay, this is something that helps me be a better person. I'm sure you'll still continue to process other things and stuff and continue and it will help you like with your writing and stuff too as well. And I love the idea of like people just continuing to find hobbies and try new things like no matter what age you are. I think it's just so great. If there was like one piece of advice that you would give other women or maybe your younger self now having this kind of hindsight, whether it's about dating or just something, that you think is has been valuable for you that you would want to share.
I would say, at risk of sounding repetitive, there really is nothing more valuable in my life than my friendships. I think a lot of people, I've I feel like I've heard lots of people talk about friendships kind of falling on your priority list as you get older, and as your career gets busier, and maybe you have a family and have kids, and there's just all these things vying for your attention. And I hear from a lot of people that, friends kind of fall lower on the list, and you don't live by everyone. You're not necessarily in a walkable community with all the people that you
Mhm.
love. And I would just really like to reject that image. When I look at my life now and think about what brings me the most joy, and when I picture my life in the future, um, you know, my friends not being there makes me really sad, and it's not
Mhm.
a image of the future that appeals to me. And so I think this is both advice to myself moving forward, and to anyone else who it resonates for. Um, but all relationships take work and take time invested in people, and I know that I might have more now than I will in the future. But
Right.
I think that, we fill our days with what's important to us, and I would really like to keep this feeling that I have now, of friends as like a central piece of my life and a very high priority. I'd like to keep that feeling, moving forward, even though I recognize that, life gets hard and life gets busy. Everyone
Mhm.
gets busy, So I both recognize how valuable it is to have all this time to dedicate to my friends right now. And it's really important to me that I keep making that a priority. And so, advice to myself and advice to others is
Yeah.
to keep making friends a priority. Every day we choose what we want to fill our days with. And my friends are a very central part of all of mine.
That's awesome. And that brings me to the end of our conversation. A piece of your essay that I wanted to repeat that really goes hand in hand with what you just said. You wrote, I know unconditional love because my friends exist and I hear their laughter. And I just thought that was so beautiful. And I really do hope that our listeners can be inspired by that line and what you just said to really love and cherish friends or family or that people in our lives. I think it can be so easy to believe that our time is infinite. But you really know when you never know when something is going to happen. So to really cherish those moments with the people while we can. And like you said, to make them a priority and not allow other commitments to sort of take precedence and allow other things that happen in our day to day to keep us from prioritizing and making an investment in the people in our lives. Thank you so much for writing this piece and for taking the time to talk to me about it. I feel like I've already learned so much from you too, so I'm sure other people will as well. And just like the gratitude that you have for your friends is very beautiful. So I'm so honored that you wrote this piece and that you came on the show and shared it with all of us. So thank you, Grace.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here, and I was really drawn to your call for submissions and the way that you seem to value women's stories and want to create this project and give it a platform. So I'm very excited to be involved and to share my writing in this way. So thank you for having me.